more excited today to have my friend Adam Bannister with us from Kenya. He's at Angama Mara, just one of the most special places in the world that I've ever been able to experience. And Adam is just truly one of the most talented wildlife photographers in the world, let alone in Africa, and really a storyteller like no other. He runs the Angama photography studio, and he's with us today from Kenya. So super excited to have you along, Adam.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for giving me this chance to chat to you all about some of the photographs and some of our moments in the Maasai Mara.
For sure. And the experience that we had together a year or so ago was one that is still at the top of my list that I think of often, and hopefully we'll have a chance to come back and visit you again. But you've had a strange year with COVID, like everybody else. Things with tourism, have changed, and really the Mara looked different during that time. You guys had extreme flooding, roads went out, bridges went out, and at the same time there were really no visitors there. So you got to experience all of that kind of on a solo mission through that time. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so essentially, I mean, I forget the exact date, but I think it was about the 19th of March when certainly towards the end of March when Kenya just closed down, really. And the parks by default closed down with it too. And I was faced with the big decision of having to work out whether I was going to fly home to South Africa or kind of wait it out. And at that stage, we thought it was just going to be a month, maybe two. And so I decided that I would hang around and actually try and use this opportunity to get into the park without there being people. And I have the incredible privileged position of being handed a key, literally a key to the gate of the Maasai Mara. And I don't believe they've ever done that before. All I had to do is whenever I drove in, I used to have to send a little WhatsApp note to the head of the park saying, at this time I'm in and at this time I'm out, just so he had an idea of what I was doing. But yeah, then I could do whatever I liked. And it coincided with the April flooding, which in the history of the recorded Maasai Mara, since they've been recording weather patterns, it's the most amount of rain we've ever received. And everything flooded, everything broke, everything got stuck. And in a way it was incredible. In another way it was terrifying, because I used to go out by myself in a car in the morning and I could get stuck, and I could be stuck for 10 hours. That was my record, because there was no one else who was going to drive past. So I would have to walk to get reception, to phone someone, to get tractors out. So it was a bit messy at times, but it did allow me access to seeing an ecosystem slowly start to recover from the people traffic and just from rewilding itself, which was incredible.
Yeah, and you made, I think you said 100 videos in 100 days, or it was something approximately like that. And we'll put a link to those so that folks can go back and kind of see what that looked like on a day-to-day basis. It was fascinating for me to see, like I had told you, because so many of the places I recognized, but at the same time it looks so vastly different because of the floods.
Yeah. So the 100-day thing was basically, we wanted to keep the Maasai Mara on people's minds, and that's what it started.
Poof, here we are after lightning struck Angama in Africa. We lost Adam. We lost you last time because of a storm came across the Mara, but with the wonders of technology, a week and a half later, we're back. We're talking all things good about safaris in Kenya and Maasai Mara and Angama Mara and all those good things. So I guess I say welcome back, but we're going to try to pick up where we left off.
Thank you. Yeah, hopefully we have, well, like this time, we have got another very electric storm coming in through the Maasai Mara. So you'll also notice a bit of a change behind. Last time, there was just one photo behind me.
I think
Since
so.
That was taken, we've managed to get our act together. We managed to now put the 3 winning photographs from the last 3 years, but we'll talk about that later. But
Sure.
There is a change.
Right. We'll do just a real slow, like cross dissolve between where we left off and this, and it'll be some sort of, metaphysical experience that we've got. So that's a good thing. So
Yeah.
where we were talking, I went back and looked at the video. We were talking about, the COVID experience and how that affected the Mara. You had gone out and done this series of videos to just kind of tell what was happening without the tourism. You literally had the key to the Mara. You could kind of come and go. Those 100 videos in 100 days. Tell me just about the experience of that and what you were ultimately able to tell for a story.
Yeah. So the objective of those was to keep the Mara on everyone's radar. And it started off with that actually, and then it actually morphed into a more of a positive story kind of feel. Because by that stage, when we got past the 50 days and people were really starting to get a bit negative about this whole COVID thing, and it was starting to kind of draw home as to what was really going on, we started having to look at what positive spins we could put on, what little stories we could tell that would kind of make people feel a little bit good about themselves and good about the world. And so we really did start to shift towards some really nice stories about wildlife, about communities, about the people, about the ranges, and everything that really is part and parcel with this landscape. And so I'd go out every morning, between 5 and 5:30 every morning, with a whole array of cameras. Some of them were shot on just an iPhone, some of them were shot on GoPros, some of them on mirrorlesses, like a whole range. And that's why it was never a thing about the quality. This was always just about raw storytelling. In the process, though, the amazing thing for me is I managed just to build an incredible stock library of footage that I would never have had otherwise. So that was a real bonus for me.
That's awesome. I think we mentioned it before, but I mean, you've got such a, cool, if you want to call it, job there, running the photography studio at Ngama Mara, which is just one of the most incredible places that anyone would ever experience in the whole world. And you get to kind of just run the photography side of things there and basically go out on these safaris day after day. As tourists are coming back, you are leading these people and teaching them about photography and about the animals and stuff. But you had this amazing window of time where as a photographer, you could just kind of go without the pressure of having to lead. Talk about the experience that you had as a photographer and, learning the animals and the wildlife better and the landscape and all of the things that you could kind of do to sort of, craft your photography skills and your eye and the things that you didn't have the pressure of having other people around you that you were guiding.
Yeah. I think that's exactly it, is that I had never had so much time where I could experiment and be selfish with my experimentation. So normally I do a lot of teaching. So guests will come in here, I'll teach them to edit, how to photograph, the theory, the practical, I'll go out with them. But then you're always worried about the other person, whether the other person's getting the shot, are their settings right? So I'd never had so much time where I could literally concentrate purely on my own style and also experiment, meaning that I know that tomorrow I'm going to see another lion. I'm in a very fortunate position. So the lion that I'm with today, I can maybe change my settings, change everything, because I might get that dream shot. And if I don't, I'll be here tomorrow and the next day and the next day. Right. So that was the real gem, was the fact that I could be selfish and I could spend ridiculous amount of time with these animals, and there was no one else, there were no other cars, there were no other disturbances. And yeah, it was extraordinary. I mean, obviously I had to get back each day and put together and edit this stuff into a short little video, which is massively time consuming, as you know. But there was this sort of dilemma for me all the time, which was, do I take a photograph or do I film? Which anyone who's tried to dabble in both will know it's a very different world to play in, because they are different worlds. Yeah. And so when you sit filming and taking a photo at the same time, that's always the problem for me. But I think I managed to do a good little bit of juggling between them. Yeah. Normally I go with kind of compose the frame, let it start filming, and if I think there's going to be extraordinary one motion, then I quickly try and take a photo at the same time. So yeah, I'm neither a photographer nor a cinematographer. I like to think myself as a bit of a blend.
I totally hear you, and I think about what I do is a lot of the same. And I think about our experience when we were there with Grit Media a year or so ago, and that's exactly what it was. And we were the semi-tourists, but we were also there working. But it was this constant like, oop, photos and you're just ripping off photos, and then it's like, oop, switch to film, and then we're doing this, and then you ultimately get back to the computer and you have to, I always end up sort by file type, because you've got this day that's, raw files, MP4, raw file, raw, it's just you jumping back and forth, and it's kind of brain overload. But you're in an amazing place to be able to do that. Much of this time, or you did have the migration to work with this last time when there were no people around, which typically is a super, super busy time on the Mara, where people come from all over the world to see, the wildebeests in droves make their way across the Mara, and the triumph and tragedy of that process, with alligators and lions and the predator prey relationship. Talk about that experience a little bit. We've got a couple photos that we do want to look at that kind of tell the story, both like I said, the triumph and tragedy, the sadness, the kind of some of the uncomfortableness of the process. But what was that like without all the tourists around?
Yeah, and just to put it a little bit more to complete the circle. So since our first part one of this interview, I actually flew down to Tanzania, to the southern part of the Serengeti, to go and watch the birthing process. So January, February, March, they tend to give birth, and then they slowly start to migrate. And they hit where I am now, the Maasai Mara, Kenya Maasai Mara. In traditionally June, July, August, those are the peak months when they're crossing the river. Mm-hmm. Now these river crossings are just bizarre events, because these animals are terrified of the water. I mean, understandably, they are terrified, because in that water, you've got crocodiles, you've got hippos, and you've got really, really dangerous flowing currents. And then, of course, you've got rocks underneath the water. So it's a dangerous, dangerous environment. But yet they feel compelled to cross from one side to the other. Now, it's largely drawn about and brought about through rainfall and through grazing and the quest for that green grass. And it does bring around a lot of tourists, because it is one of the most remarkable spectacles in the natural world. It really is. You're talking over 1 million animals trying to get through a river over a course of a number of days. Lots of carnage. That's the best word to describe it, really. Lots of chaos, lots of unrest, lots of uncertainty, mayhem. And so to have been able to be there for a duration of it, where there was very few people, was wonderful, because it allowed me to slow the whole thing down. Now, normally this time is really, again, I'll use the word chaos, because you've got all these cars parked along, and then suddenly the wildebeest cross into the river, and the cars race forward to get a position so they can see what they can do. They can photograph, they can film. But when there's no cars, you can just slow it down. You can drive, you can park there, then you can move and you can park there, then you can move and park there. I had never had the privilege of being able to view a single crossing from multiple spots. I'd never had that in the 3 years subsequent to that. This was the first time where I could go, okay, I've got 1,000 photos from this angle. Let me try another angle. And you normally don't get that. So the ability to slow it down also meant that I saw more, and also meant that I had more time off the camera, meaning I was able to put the camera down and actually just watch. So it was a much more enjoyable crossing season for me. And I do believe that was brought about through fewer cars.
Well, let's talk about a couple of these images. The first
Sure.
one is not so much the carnage, but it artistically it's the zebra amongst the wildebeests photo. I don't need to describe it much. It's thousands of dark wildebeests in a single prominent focal point of this zebra. Just quickly, I mean, tell the story of the image. I mean, it speaks for itself, but what do you remember all about it?
Yeah. Oh man, I remember this very well. So what you would think when we say there's like 1.5 million wildebeest, you would think that it's actually quite an easy shot to get, because they're dense, they come together. But in all my time, I have only really managed 2 photos like this. One was the bum of a zebra, and then the bums of all these wildebeest, and then the second one was this one. And it's so hard to get, because the wildebeest, they spread out, or there's always trees in the way, or there's a car, or there's something, or there's a road, or there's something in the way. So it's very difficult to get a number like this. Also, there is a very large number of wildebeest in this photograph. If you were to count that, there are a couple of hundred just in that one frame. There are two zebra. The one is feeding. Mm-hmm. To get this photograph, I needed a bit of height. So I actually managed to stand on the bonnet of the car. and give me that little bit of elevation. And I was using a mirrorless camera, which has this Canon, which had a flip screen. So I was actually able to hold the camera above my head from the bonnet and take a few shots, focusing smack bang in the middle of that herd. And I needed that height because if I were to take it at eye level, you wouldn't truly have grasped that depth of how many there were. There were even more than I got in this frame, but I didn't have the right lens with me at the time to capture the sheer magnitude. But I think this did it because I wanted to fill it up. I didn't want there to be too many gaps and spaces. And then I waited and waited and waited for both zebras to put their head up, but they never did. So I just had to settle with one up and one down.
Yeah, amazing photo. And I think, like I said, artistically, it's just beautiful. But all of the things that you just explained, I think are a great photo lesson in that. And I tell folks all the time in teaching this that, you know, get your camera to a place that people don't always see. And the fact that, you know, here you are witnessing this amazing spectacle. And, you know, on a typical year, there could have been hundreds and hundreds of people taking photos. But the fact that you would, you know, get up on the bonnet and then additionally hold the camera up above just to get that how different that would be to get that shot versus, you know, 6, 7, 8, 9 feet lower, sitting there comfortably, just snapping away. That's what makes a photo as wonderful as this one is.
I cannot stress enough how important it is to move that camera from where we normally have it. So when I'm on the car with other photographers and I see them just sitting there taking photos, I know that height. I've seen 100,000 million photos of a lion from that height. If you just drop it just a little bit or raise it a little bit, you immediately create a photograph that is that little bit more unique. And so the creation, the invention of the swivel screen on cameras is, in my opinion, one of the single greatest improvements that a camera has. I've always been very much a Canon, staunch Canon supporter, but I started getting really annoyed with the fact their high-end camera models do not have those flip screens. And so that was the reason that I actually started playing around with their mirrorless, is because I literally wanted that one aspect. You know, for a while I used HDMI cables to little TV screens so I could try and see, but it was never fast enough. You needed that screen, you needed that low, that high, and I would encourage everyone listening to just try and take a photograph from a different place from where other people are doing it.
For sure. The best wildlife, especially safari photographers that I know, have always had some sort of modification to their vehicle or to something to be able to get that. The funny story that I've told that you were, you know, a part of was when we were filming and shooting that female lion that was sitting up on that knoll, and I'll show the picture here, and she sat there so nicely for a while, but we were hanging out of the vehicle, kind of, you know, almost holding onto each other's ankles to get down almost into the grass to shoot that low angle up at her. She stood up and whipped her tail and head went down, and it was this moment of, she was really tired of us, you know, being that close and hanging out. And I don't remember who, you know, grabbed, I think it was Will, was in the back, and we're like, well, we're gonna have to pull you out of here and back out a little bit. But the whole intent, and the best photos that I got from that trip, and that anybody were literally like hanging out into the grass where you were down, you know, below the eye level of the animal, which just puts that much more emotion into the shot. And I think that's exactly what you're saying about, you know, getting that place. Don't see.
As soon as the animal breaks the horizon, it shows the power of that animal.
For sure.
So when you're photographing from a car, you're photographing down, and you're making it like the human is more important than the animal. The human is more powerful than the animal. But as soon as you can get down and you elevate that animal, you suddenly change the whole story around. Exactly. So do that. And obviously be careful, obviously be very respectful of the animal. And we, as photographers, we all sit on that fence, we all push sometimes, but we learn. And as long as you learn, and as long as you correct your mistakes, maybe you went too close, drive away. Maybe you went too far, drive closer. So it takes learning. But yeah, that's the biggest encouragement and biggest lesson I have for everyone is about that camera.
For sure. Let's kind of just touch on a couple other ones from the migration. You know, I guess it's visiting a little bit more of the carnage. You've got the image of all of the wildebeests. It's the one that's actually leaping, that's in the air, going to hit the water, and there's 75 or 100 others that are looking kind of just, you can just imagine what's going through their minds, this moment of truth. And as hard as they are to look at, talk about the experience of being behind a camera and seeing that happen.
Yeah, so in fact, 2 of those photos are taken in the same sighting about half an hour apart. The one where the wildebeest is launching off, and then the one where there's a mound of just dead bodies. That is the most sad and dramatic crossing that I've ever seen. And I've probably seen realistically 300 crossings. What happened that day was wildebeest are pretty dim animals in that they congregate and then they wait and wait and wait. And as soon as one starts to go for it, the rest of them are like lemmings and they just follow. And what happened that day was, for some reason, they decided to cross in an incredibly steep area, an area where the jump into the water ranged from kind of 5 meters to probably about 20 meters at times. Literally hit the ground. And the rest just came. They just followed, like it was mayhem. They jumped and jumped and jumped and eventually you literally could see a pack of animals just starting to form, and most of them were still alive. That was the most grotesque thing, is that they were alive, they were crawling, they'd obviously broken bones and legs. And in the middle of that, I'm just looking at the photograph now, you've got the one that is clearly alive, but he's stuck. He's really stuck by his own, his friends and family are dying around him, but he is stuck. Then there's one that got out and he's looking back as if to say, like, are you coming with me, or what on earth has just happened? But it is a very, very sad photo. It's one of those moments that I've spoken to guys who've been living in this area. It happens every kind of handful of years, maybe every 5, 6, 7 years, that you get an incident like this. And for me to have been there was remarkable. The other photograph happened almost at the exact same time, literally 20 meters downstream. So had they just not jumped in, had they come a little bit further downstream and jumped, then they would have had a jump that was still a sizable jump, but it would have landed them into the water. And so that was the photograph of when the wildebeest is in mid-leap. And so when you're watching something like this, you're torn as to whether to watch or to photograph. But of course, the photographer and the documentarian and all inside of us says, let's photograph. And then it becomes a thing of trying to get the settings right, making sure that you're not getting things blurry or too slow, whatever. But once you're comfortable with your settings, then it's a case of trying to predict. Is that animal going to jump? When's that animal going to jump? Okay, it's going to jump, go for it. And I've never been a big believer in this mass rattling off of just hundreds of images. Just you hear people doing it where literally like cannon fodder, they just go for it. I'm more of the, okay, wait. Okay, I think it's going to happen, and then a short little burst. So in this sequence here that you're looking at with the wildebeest jumping, I think I've got 3 photos. One where it's about to jump, one where it's leap like that, and one where it's about to hit the water. And I personally prefer that. But I just love the movement. It shows the difficulty of the crossing. It shows the one struggling to get through the water already. And it shows the rest of them going, oh dear, we've got to make that same jump coming up for us.
The talking about the timing of things and shooting the burst, and you can get really critical of images, and I'm sure you did as you looked at this sequence. But I think one of the incredible things about this is that, yes, you've got the one in the water, you've got the one in the air, you've got the group that's looking with this, just desperation, like, oh, we're going to have to do this. But I love the fact, and the perfect timing of this is that the one that's in the air, it contrasts so nicely against just the light nature of the riverbank there. The dark nature of the wildebeest. You captured that contrast in that one image as well. If that wildebeest had been another meter lower, it would have gotten lost in the dark side of the bank. So I think, like you said, timing is such an amazing part of what you have to capture as well. So.
And there is undoubtedly a lot of luck that goes into a lot of these photos, but there is a huge amount of understanding and anticipating.
Right.
And for me, when people ask me how I became a photographer, I said, well, I did 10 years studying animal behavior and being a guide first. because you learn what to look for. You learn when things may happen, when things won't happen, when to drive away from a sighting, when to wait and be patient. So that comes with time.
The amount of knowledge and just kind of understanding the animals in this ecosystem. You know, we had watched that the cheetah the one evening, and to have Dougie, our guide, know that that cheetah had just lost her cubs, and it put a whole new spin on the story of what was unfolding in front of you, to understand the emotions. And you guys do such an amazing job of knowing, oh, that's this pack of lions, and this happened a couple days ago, or this particular male lion. You know the story. It's almost this intimate personal relationship that you develop, which ultimately leads to some of these just absolutely incredible photos. You've been a part of the greatest Maasai Mara project the last couple of years that you guys started.
Yeah.
The images that you've got on the wall behind you are powerful, strong, incredible images. So tell me a little bit about the contest. I know you think you're into your 4th year now. Talk about how this has taken safari photography to another place and really shined an amazing light on just the story of what's happening there on the Mara.
Yeah, so 3.5 years ago, essentially, we started a photographic competition in the Mara called the Greatest Maasai Mara Photographer of the Year. And the intention was to try and showcase images from throughout the entire Mara ecosystem, try and create a portal, a platform whereby photographers could enter their images and be showcased, have their work showcased, but at the same time raise funds for conservation work, which now during COVID has been massively important because the guest numbers have decreased. But essentially, every entry comes with a $20 entry fee, which is a donation that goes to one of 6 conservation organizations that we vetted and we believe in. And then, so we can hand that money over to them straight, 100% of it. That gives you an entry. And then at the end of the year, we hand over $10,000 to the winner. Yeah. So behind me, the last three years of winners. But what we realized is that a winning photograph isn't just a solo event. It actually requires a second person usually, and that's the guide. So we set the competition up in a way to reward not just the photographer, but the guide as well. And so the photographer will walk away with $10,000, but the guide this year is going to walk away with a trip to South Africa, to the Kruger National Park. Last year, a trip to Victoria Falls along the Zambezi River. Previous year, a car. So in essence, the guides will get a large prize too. And that is in recognition of the work that they do, the time they spend, the patience, the money they've invested in their own careers. It's the realization that in order for you to have taken that photograph, the guide probably told you that you should be taking that photograph. And so it's the only competition, the only wildlife competition in the world that I'm aware of that rewards both parties of a single photograph. And at the same time raises really good money for conservation, provides a platform for up and coming photographers. And yeah, it's a really good initiative across the Mara. So do have a look at that, the Greatest Maasai Mara.
For sure. So with the work that you do, you can drive and get close, but you know, some of these images I'm going to show on the screen right now, we've got this intense image of an eagle that you're just truly seeing the catch light in the eye of the eagle. And at the same time, some of the images that are powerful are more of a wide angle telling the story of the expanse. Talk about your gear, talk about some of the things that go through your mind as you encounter these different things and trying to tell a big wide story versus a very telephoto centric, get into the, you know, the emotion of things that are happening.
Yeah. So great question. With wildlife, we tend to really want big lenses, which is what makes it very expensive, unfortunately. But I must put a bit of a warning there, and that's a personal journey that I've gone through, is that when I first started photographing wildlife, I always wanted to get very close. I wanted the biggest lens possible. I wanted to park as close as possible. And I wanted to just zoom in and zoom in and zoom in. And that was because I just loved showing things like the eyes and the details. But the more I spend time out here, the less that big lens is actually being used. So for this photograph, I think I was using a 400 for this one. But I actually now, my go-to lens is becoming more this like a 70-200. Mm-hmm. Even something a lot wider, 17 to 40. And that is because I've realized that there are lots and lots of other photographs that are taken close up of animals. Now, this Marshall Eagle that you see is slightly different because there aren't that many photographs taken like that you see. But if you're looking at like a lion, for example, taking a picture of a lion's eye, it's been done. It's not hard to get. So what actually tells more of a story is when you zoom out, or when you park further away, or when you use a wider angle, and you start to try and place the animal in its environment. Mm-hmm. So I'm a big, big believer in an animal in its environment scenario setting. And ideally, what makes a great photograph is often when the atmosphere or the climate or the landscape is as important as the actual subject matter. So you'll see the 2020 winning photograph of the Greatest Maasai Mara competition. If you want to show that, it's a leopard in the rain. Now the leopard is wonderful, the colors are wonderful, but the rain is as exciting and as interesting as the leopard is. So as soon as you can combine an atmosphere and an environment with the individual, then you're onto a winning shot. That's where that one photograph I've got of the lion walking through water, that's just a lion walking down the road, really. But that road during that season was completely flooded. We'd had the most rain in recorded history in the Maasai Mara. So instead of getting a tight shot of a lion with wonderful water dropping off his paws, which would have been great, but it could have been the Okavango Delta. It could have been anywhere else in Africa. But if I zoom out, you can see it's a flood. You can see it's a road. You can see the landscape. You can make out it's the Mara. So it tells a story. And so personally, I'm more for photographs that tell stories rather than individual moments. And so I would encourage you to use a variety of lenses. And I personally am a Canon guy, but that really means very, very little to me. Sony, Nikon, Fuji, whatever you can get your hands on, just use.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that I love about even this series that I'm doing with 1,000 Words is the fact that, yes, you can look at it in an image of a lion and that's wonderful. We've seen them, but to have a story that goes along with it. And, you know, the one that we're looking at of the lion walking through the water, that was a generational time with that much, you know, water on the Mara, and to have the lion, you know, walking straight towards you, and there becomes so much more of a story behind it than just here's a lion in the water. And I love that about what we're able to do. And like you said, the gear that we choose, I've learned that over time, like you have, that they're tools. And yes, it's great to have a big lens because you get to reach out and do things that you might not be able to with a smaller lens, but having what you're seeing behind the camera is much more important than what gear you've got in your hands. And to be able to tell a story like this is the powerful part of what we're able to do. And you're obviously lucky that you're able to do that in a really, truly amazing place.
The single biggest improvement to gear that I think is making the most difference, and it's something that I'm incredibly jealous of because I can't afford to keep up with it, is the focusing. So the fact that these cameras nowadays are able to have this animal eye tracking means that it's becoming less and less of an issue in your focusing. It means you're missing fewer shots. Mm-hmm. So that is the one thing. If you are looking at getting a camera, pay a lot of attention to the focusing, because they have made massive developments in recent years in that, and that would make life easier. For example, the male lion running quite low. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of at eye level to him. Even the one at the cub, there's a lovely one at the cub, and it's looking up at its mom, and its mom's walking ahead of it. That's taken in a pretty crazy way, where I'm in the car, but I've got a little monopod, so like a single tripod, and I've taken the photograph upside down. I've scribbled the screen around so I can see, and then I've got a little remote, and I'm pressing. But I'm having to half press, focus, take, half press, take, half press, take. Rather now, I know the cameras exist, that you could just lock in on that little cub's eyes and just hammer away. So the chances of getting that shot are much greater. But I'm a little bit more old school in that I kind of get that focal point, put him on the face, half press, take, half press, take. I'm not a back button focuser guy. I'm kind of just literally am the half press take. Likewise. But you can see another example with the lion, the male lion kind of charging down the path. Really, that came from positioning the car. The one thing, the greatest suggestion I have is you'll see all these roads through all the national parks in Africa. They've got a little bit of a dip to them, and that's to let the water run off. Mm-hmm. And I'm always telling the people, park in the ditch, go low. Because what happens is the car then drops, And suddenly, if the animal's on the road, the animal elevates. And so this is taken just normally in a car, and you can see I'm actually lower than the lion's eye. And by getting that eye, by getting him in focus, and by getting that movement, you can just see his power.
Yeah. So the dichotomy that's happening here is we've got this gear now that takes so much of the skill away from what we have to do. I mean, you can literally take it and half press, and it's going to find the eyes, and it's going to focus, and it's going to do so many of the things that the great photographers in the world were used to define their greatness, because they were able to, have that skill. So now I really feel like the great photographers are the ones, like I've talked about with you, that are the storytellers, the ones that can think about, okay, I know my camera is going to do all of these things. How can I get it to a place that's going to tell a better story? I know the camera is going to capture what I want it to. That's sort of out of sight, out of mind. But the great ones are the ones that are going to think a little bit different with the way they compose and what they're looking for with the story.
It has become tricky. I mean, it's wonderful. In many ways, it is absolutely wonderful that just your everyday person can go and take a fantastic shot. That is awesome. But it's made life more and more difficult for the more specialist photographers to try and define themselves, which is why I believe we're going to see a real great increase and improvement in photography, because people are having to think out the box. They're having to do that, because nowadays there's just so much going on Instagram that if you want to be remembered, if you want to create a shot, you've got to have something to it, which is why I'm really enjoying, there's a sudden trend now of guys who are getting very creative with these hidden camera traps in locations. Mm-hmm. And they're not just trying to get like, oh, let's get a picture of a black leopard, or let's get a picture of a normal leopard. They're trying to let's get a black leopard climbing a rock with a full moon behind it. So they're using the technology that exists, but they're planning so much that they really are very good photographers. It's not like they're just using the technology. They know what they want. They know where that leopard's going to climb because it's animal behavior. They know when the moon is going to be rising because that's knowledge that they've got. So it's putting all those things together, and there's a new brand of technology, of photography that we're starting to see, which is quite exciting in my idea.
It is, and I think that's where the art of photography is going. And like we talked about, there's going to be documentary photography where you have to be in the right place at the right time. Those, the wildebeest jumping off the side of the riverbank, right place, right time. You could have had that in your mind, but you had to be there, if you will, for it. But a lot of the artistry that's going to happen through photography is, like you're saying, like, I've got this shot in mind that I know that I want, but I'm going to have to really do some planning in advance and then rely on the technology to deliver that image, which is, I think probably, like you're saying, where things are going.
I sent you a photograph of a crossing where you've got some zebra kind of charging through the water, and there's a crocodile. Mm-hmm. There's a kind of a crocodile going for a zebra. Yeah. And that's taken from low in the car. But if you can just picture that, where you've got the eyes of the zebra just trying to get through this water, and you've got a crocodile coming up behind him. So when I was with you, when I actually met you, I just took a photograph with you in the car, in fact, of a cheetah. Mm-hmm. And that cheetah sitting on a mound with the rain behind it and the carbon behind it, one of the greatest cheetah shots I've ever taken. That was actually included into a book series called Remembering Wildlife. That year happened to be the year they chose cheetah. And so it was published last year. All money raised from that went to cheetahs. Now this year, in fact, it's just starting now. The fundraising for it is Remembering African Wild Dogs, a highly, highly endangered animal, fewer than probably 6,500 of them left in Africa, critically endangered. They really are in trouble. And the other day, I had very few photos of wild dogs. I've got nothing great. And I thought, crap, I simply can't get into this book. Anyway, in January, so not too long ago, I heard a report of a wild dog pack that had just come into the Maasai Mara. And I immediately ran for the car and just drove. I threw in a toothbrush, threw in some clothes. I didn't know when I would come back. I'm like, I have to get a photograph. And I drove 3 hours, got to a spot, and the guy said, listen, the wild dogs were here 5 minutes ago, but they're gone. You can't find them. And so I was like, no, I'm not giving up. So I drove around and around and around. And eventually I came across a guy on a motorbike. And he's like, yeah, I just saw them. Follow me. So there I am driving behind this guy on a motorbike. And eventually, within minutes, we're suddenly in this open clearing, and there's a pack of 9 wild dogs. This is the first time I'd ever seen them in the Maasai Mara. They have only been seen a few times. And I immediately was like, wow, this is crazy. But then I went, oh dear, shit, I haven't actually, this isn't the right setting. I'm never going to get a characteristic Maasai Mara wild dog shot here because I'm basically in a village. Like there's bushes, it's messy, the grass is wrong, it's just wrong. And I'm not going to get this photo that I want to get in this book. But then I was like, hang on, everyone else is going to submit photographs to this book that are going to be beautiful shots of dogs in beautiful locations and beautiful landscapes. Let me embrace the reality of the situation. And the reality of the situation is that wild dogs are at arms with humans. They live together, they fight, they eat goats, they eat sheep, they get rabies, they get canine distemper. The people and the wild dogs are like this in Africa. So I thought, hang on, let me just drive a little bit back, park the car, and wait. And eventually I'm going to get a picture of this pack of wild dogs with people. And this isn't the photo you're looking at now isn't the photograph that's going to be in the book. I'm saving that, but there's going to be a photograph that's similar of a motorbike and the guy getting off his motorbike with wild dogs right next to him. And for me, it's not a beautiful shot. It's not one of those ones that you'll ever frame and put up in a wall in a house. And it tells a very powerful story.
The photos that we've talked about, there's this beautiful balance of the photos that are going to hang on the wall behind you, the beautiful photos that are artistic, and the ones that tell the story. And I think, you know, the greatest Maasai Mara contest, those are going to be beautiful photos that are going to hang in art galleries. The Remembering Wildlife is going to have plenty of beautiful photos, but it's also going to have the ones that tell the story. And there's this great balance. You've been incredibly successful with both. The Remembering Wildlife series, you've been able to be, I know, in the lion book, in the cheetah book, now the wild dog book, all going to great organizations. But you've found this beautiful sweet spot between telling amazing stories with the photos and still being able to create beautiful photos that would hang on walls and galleries.
Thank you.
Adam, it's just so great to catch up with you and have you on here. I really, truly hope we get a chance to spend some time together in the field again, because that was 8 or 10 days of just my life's highlights, chasing animals around and capturing amazing images. So I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk and show you some of the photos. It really is a magical place. And for those of you who haven't been to the Maasai Mara, she's ready for you. Whenever you're ready, do come visit.
Yeah, myself much included. I definitely want to get back there. So thanks again.
Right.
So that's it for this episode of 1,000 Words. Yes, it took a couple weeks to piece this together, and you know, me getting up early in the morning and Adam working late at night because of the time difference. It was just so great to catch up with him, and he's just such a talented and gifted photographer and storyteller in an amazing place. I feel grateful for his friendship and the ability to, even through technology and some of the mishaps with technology, be able to help to share his story and tell his version of 1,000 Words, which he could tell over and over and over with a lot of amazing stories. If you're enjoying these, I encourage you to hit the subscribe button, both here on YouTube or through the podcast format that you're choosing. I appreciate you checking out this episode with Adam, and look forward to many more of you. Until next time, thank you.